Hello, good afternoon. My name is Luciano Pana Tronca, and I'm very happy to be here online with you talking about urban freight and, in my case, innovation and transition to a more sustainable system. Cities are major carbon emitters, and in this context, transport plays a very important role, as transport is responsible for around a quarter of emissions in the EU. Adding to this, the transport sector is really hard to decarbonize. As you can see in the graph, emissions have increased from the 1990s baseline, which is used to determine climatic targets. The drivers for this increase is usually attributed to e-commerce and the increase of the use of light vehicles. Some cities are implementing measures to try to achieve these reductions, but these are scattered and a systems approach is needed, not only to think about technological and operational innovations, but also to be more democratic and to ask the stakeholders their views and what would make them change their behaviors. Innovation in this sense responds to a co-evolutionary development between niche radical innovation, so that innovation that allows for a different trajectory of emissions, the regimes, which is a set of rules and regulations and user preferences that support any system that allows for incremental innovation, and the landscape, so the more macroeconomy, ideology, and social values, more general variables. Therefore, organizing innovation ecosystems can aid to a transition to a more sustainable system. So, how can cities plan for innovation that aims for a transition to a sustainable system in the context of increased demand for movements of goods, an industry that can be defined as complex due to the variety and the number of players, an innovation journey that needs long-term planning. We are looking at maybe innovation timelines between 10 and 15, 20 years, and the low uptake of skills and planning instruments in the public sector. If we compare, for example, public transport and freight, we see that in local authorities we do have officers dealing with the matter of public transport and public in general, but not so much for freight. If we look at the intersection of climate, transport, and urban freight planning, we find three main instruments, somehow related between them, but not always aligned. I put together the Climate Plans and Transport Actions database, and it draws from the Carbon Disclosure Project 2021 Cities Mitigation Plans database. It includes plans between 2020 and 2022. There are 50 entries and include information on the level of autonomy, an assessment of strategic planning background, quantification of impact of change, the illusion of monitoring and evaluation, and whether they have performed a socioeconomic or environmental analysis and target dates. What we can see in the graphs is that not all the climate plans mention SAMPs, 60% does, 40% don't. About half make an assessment of what are the links between transport and the other sectors in cities. Most of them have an indication of impact, but some not, and about the same percentage do not mention monitoring and evaluation. 21 out of 50 cities mention at least one logistic-related decarbonization action, in which they include city center operational plans to reduce freight emissions or financial incentives for heavy-duty vehicle efficiency programs, the use of drones for freight, and also very general actions such as green logistics, the promotion of sustainable freight, and so on. So what we can see here, and I said before, we see the cities are implemented, but these are not near a systematic approach. So what we need is a bit of a more intense planning from the public sector in the freight arena. By looking at many case studies and also the literature on transitions and urban freight and innovation ecosystems, I made a synthesis about the factors that influence the planning or the orchestration of innovation ecosystems from a public sector approach. So what we can see is that we have policies and incentives. We have the role of public sector, so how the administration see themselves and what type of powers they have, and the knowledge of the ecosystem and the contextual factors. So we can say these are the city conditions. All of these affect the way cities plan for the implementation of innovation ecosystems. And then we have the ways in which these are organized. As we see in the slide, we can have transition-oriented living labs, we can have intermediate organizations or ecosystem support organizations, we have product-oriented living labs, we have accelerators and incubators, which are more related to the private sector way of approaching innovation, and also we have smart city agencies. When looking at or making the point on policies and incentives for innovation ecosystems from the public sector point of view, I came up with this incentives framework, we can call it, and we have three different groups. The first one includes the internal incentives, which are directed at improving the public sector offering to help. We have the external ones directed at the ecosystem actors, and we see here financial support, management support, and regulatory support for them. And finally, those incentives directed at improving the city conditions, which means the favorable, so improving the favorable conditions for innovation to emerge in a place. Today, I bring you two case studies of a particular way used to incentivize freight innovation ecosystems that are called innovation calls. And these experiences are based on Horizon projects, one of which I participated. Both cities have a kind of long history of participating in these projects, and each project has built on the previous experience. So that's very interesting. The city of Antwerp, a city with more than 500,000 people, the biggest city in the Flemish region of Belgium, and one of the biggest ports in Europe. In 2016, the city of Antwerp launched the Marketplace for Mobility in the context of the Portis project. This marketplace is a platform for partnerships with providers to offer solutions for different mobility challenges, including passengers and freight as well. What they have done was they developed three types of innovation calls, which are linked to different types of incentives. The first one is a promotional support. So they open a call for entrepreneurs to that need to optimize their product. So companies are offered professional support from the Smart City, Smart Ways of to Antwerp agency. Then they also offer financial support through a project call. The city launches an open call once or twice a year for companies to submit ideas to reduce congestion, and they offer financial and non-financial support similar to the promotional support that I explained before. So it's like incremental support in terms of funding and activities they propose, but also in time. And the third one is a long-term partnerships through tenders of public procurement. The city act as a contract owner for the development of two mobility apps that are still that they use now, basically. In the first call, there were 4 logistic-related projects selected, which impacted in the reduction of around 3,000 road movements less per month. And in the last call, for which there is data, the projects that were selected impacted in around 9,000 utility e-bike trips by freight operators. So the shift to e-bikes from LGVs, and a total of around 16,000 sustainable delivery packages. What is more important is that companies ended up partnering to improve their inbound supply, so that they could do it together, and that meant more efficiency. In the case of Luca, what we see is that they had a problem with poor air quality, and this took them to court actually. And since 2010, they established an environmental zone, which has been defined in the city center with some access restriction regulations. The city trialed the Luca Port Urban Distribution Center that expected many benefits in terms of the reduction of air pollutants of around 35 to 80%. However, this was not economically sustainable after subsidies were removed. So after the city authorities removed the subsidies. However, the experience has led the city to look for alternatives to keep engaging with private sector to come up with other innovation policies. When talking to Antwerp and knowing about innovation calls, they actually decided this was kind of a good idea for them, and they established a sustainability ranking that gives eco points according to static and dynamic parameters. The call made those that had more points to be invited to logistic roundtables that were held in 2022 with the objective of implementing innovation and achieving a net zero city center. In these roundtables, stakeholders express some preferences for other policies to be implemented. For example, additional load and unloading bays, the establishment of lockers outside or within the walls. Luca is, as you can see in the picture, has a wall city center, and the establishment of a new urban consolidation center, hopefully this time with some support that will make the center economically viable. Both cities have benefited from knowledge exchange within a research project environment, which meant that learnings from one city enable changes in piloting and adopting innovation in another city. As an example, we can see that for the urban consolidation center that didn't work in Luca is actually different characteristics working in Madrid within the lead project. So we need to understand that the characteristics and the relative position of the city and its stakeholders can have an impact on the implementation of innovation. In both cases, the public sector has taken the lead to define the sustainability goals of these innovation calls, which were also in line with super state funding. In this case, the EU funds the Horizon projects that allocates money for officers' time and also for stakeholder engagement. The next steps of my research is to model different types of planning frameworks, from short-term and single policy environments in which innovation can happen, to a more long-term transition-oriented or a medium-term product-oriented Living Lab, or also to model ecosystem support organizations in a way that to understand which are the incentives and which planning frameworks are more conducive to increasing these innovation ecosystems in urban freight, and obviously with the aim of reducing emissions. And this was my presentation this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, that's my email, and I'm here to take any questions. Thank you very much.